Even if you are using Lightroom Mobile, there's a ton of features that you might not know about yet, which is why I want to share everything you need to know about editing photos with Lightroom Mobile in today's video. Now, there are two versions of Lightroom Mobile. There's the free version of the app, as well as the paid version for those who are subscribed to the Adobe Creative Cloud. Now, the main differences between the free and paid version of Lightroom Mobile is that you get selective adjustments, spot removal tools, as well as auto syncing between your computer and your phone. So importing your raw images particularly is a lot easier. But with that said, do not worry, because everything that you learn here will help you regardless of which version you're using. We're gonna go through importing raw photos as if you had the free version, and then go through an entire workflow of editing the photo, creating presets, and exporting so that you know every little detail about this app. Now, the first place that you'll start in Lightroom Mobile is the library. And if you've never imported anything, it'll be completely blank. But in my case, I have some photos already imported. But for the sake of example, let's say we want to start fresh and import a batch of images. By clicking on the add image icon, you can choose to import from your camera roll or from files, which would mean importing from Dropbox or iCloud or Google Drive or something like that. In this case, since I want to import some raw files, I've added them to my Dropbox folder, which I'll go and select right now. So I'll click on From Files. Within the Browse option on iPhone, at least, this might look a little different on Android, you're going to have the location options, but right now I don't have the Dropbox or Google Drive that I'd be looking for. So you can click on the little three dots in the corner here and go to Edit. And then you should see your Dropbox and Google Drive as long as it's installed on your phone. And then you can turn on those options as you wish, press done, and now you'll have Dropbox or Google Drive to select from. So I'll click on Dropbox, then I'll navigate to the folder with my raw images that I want to import. Rather than importing your photos one by one, it's probably a little bit better just to import everything together. So rather than doing multiple imports, you can click on the three dots icon once again, and then go to Select. And now you can just tap on all the photos that you want to import. Once all your images are selected, you can just press open. Especially with your raw images, this might take a moment just to download everything and then get them onto your device. Once your photos are imported, you'll see them within the All Photos option. And just because there's so many photos that will likely end up in this folder, it's a good idea to organize them into individual albums or individual folders. So in this case, let's go and add some of these photos into a new album. By clicking on the three dots icon in the upper corner, we can press Select, and then we can go and tap on the images we want to put into the same album. Then we can press on the Add To option, and we can create a new album by pressing the plus icon and then the album option. I'll call this to Waterfall folder and click OK. With that album selected, I'll press Add, and now all of our images are going to be inside of that single album called Waterfall folder. Not sure why I called it folder when it's an album. That's a little confusing. Let's quickly fix that. By clicking the three dots here beside the Waterfall folder, I'll just go to rename. Let's call this Waterfall album because, yeah, that was confusing. Now, if you have a series of albums that are all related, rather than having a huge long list of albums, you can create folders to organize things even further. By pressing on the plus icon here, you can press on Folder, and then let's call this to Waterfalls for the sake of example. Click OK. And now we'll have a new folder called Waterfalls where we can place albums inside of. So to add our Waterfall album into this folder, we can click on those three dots and then select Move To, and click the folder we'd like to add it to. Now those images will be in their album within the folder to further organize things within the app. Now in this album of photos, we only have a few images, but there's a good chance you're gonna have dozens or hundreds of photos every time you import into the app, especially if you're importing your photos from your phone. It's gonna be a lot of images to sort through. So that's where filtering your images becomes very useful. In Lightroom Mobile, if you're familiar with Lightroom Desktop at all, you can add flags or ratings to any of your images so that you can sort the ones that you like from the ones you don't like, and that way it's easy just to only focus on the ones you want to work with. So for example, if I click on one of my images, by default it'll go into the Edit module, but if I click on Edit and then go down to Rate and View, now I have a slightly different option to choose from here. At the bottom, you see I have the star ratings as well as a flag with a check mark and an X on it. So if you want to pick a photo, for example, you would pick a photo that you like, then you'd want to press the flag with the check mark icon like so. That's going to add a picked flag. If there's a photo that you didn't like, let's say For example, this photo, I could go and press the flag with the X on it. This becomes more useful when you have a series of similar images as you see here. you can go and choose the one that you like the most by adding a flag to it. So of these 3 images, I think I like this one the most, so I'll add a flag to that one, and I'll leave the other 2 untouched for now because I don't hate them, so I'm not gonna reject them quite yet. Now, another way to add flag ratings to a photo is by pressing in the center of your image and dragging up to flag your photo as a pic, or dragging down to add your photo as a reject flag. So you can do that just by clicking and dragging your thumb up and down in the middle of your screen. Now, if you want to add a star rating instead, you can go and press on the outer left edge of your screen and drag up or down to change the star rating, just like so. What I like to use star ratings for is to further sort my picked photos. So for example, let's say you have all of your picked photos, but then you want to apply a certain type of preset to only a handful of them. Then in that case, you could add a star rating to those images, so it's easier to know exactly what ones you want to work with. Think of it as a secondary layer to organizing your images. Once you're back within your library, you can filter your images by clicking the filter option, and then you can choose to filter by flag by pressing that option there, or you can press any of the star ratings to add that as a filter as well. So in this case, I just have my picked flag option filter set, and now I only have 4 images being visible, while the other ones that did not have a picked flag are now hidden. If you're unsure about how many images are hidden, you can see just beside the album name is the total number of visible images compared to the total number of images in the entire album. In this case, I have 4 picked images out of 7 total photos. So now your album is nicely organized, and it's time to do the fun part, which is actually editing your photo. So changing your mode from review up here to edit, we can now go and begin applying our adjustments. Now within the edit module of Lightroom Mobile, all of your settings can be found down here at the bottom. Now I am using the paid version of Lightroom Mobile because I am an Adobe Creative Cloud subscriber, which means I have these extra options on the outer edge called selective and healing. Now I'm not going to talk about those particularly in this video just because I don't want to alienate anyone who's using the free version. We're just going to focus on the features that are available to everybody. Now the first and most easy place that you can start editing your photo with is by pressing this little auto option right here. If you press on auto, Lightroom Mobile will automatically create some adjustments on your edit depending on the exposure, the contrast, and the colors in your image. Now this doesn't usually add any creative effects like say a brown editing style or a vintage look or whatever you're kind of into, but it does give you a nice starting point to correct your exposure and things like that. Now if you want to view your before and after at any point during your edit, you can just press and hold on your image, and then you'll see the before option appear, and then when you let go, the after will come up. So I'll probably go back and forth between this a few different times because as you edit, it's nice to see what you've done so far. Now, since there's quite a few different tools in Lightroom Mobile, let's first focus on the crop adjustment, and that can be accessed by pressing on crop. Now within the crop adjustment, you can obviously change the angle of your crop just by dragging your thumb along the bottom, and if you want to reset it at any time, you can double tap at the bottom there to reset the angle of the crop. You can drag on the corners to change the sizing of your crop, or you can press in the middle to adjust where your crop is actually taking place on your image. Now at the bottom of your cropping options, there's a few simple things that you need to know about. The first thing is the aspect ratio locking, or the free cropping versus the not. So right now, as you can see, if I go and try to crop my photo, I can independently change the width and the height of my crop quite easily. However, if I press on this lock icon, now you see it's locked. If I go and try to change this, I cannot independently change those values. Instead, it is locked in the same aspect ratio. So if you have a particular aspect ratio that you want to be using, for example, a 4:5 crop for Instagram, then using the locked option can be useful because you can click on the preset options here, choose a 4:5 crop, and then with a locked aspect ratio, you can easily resize and position your crop to perfectly fit the cropping of Instagram. However, if you don't have any particular reason for cropping your image in a certain aspect ratio, it doesn't really matter if you have it locked or unlocked, but it is worth keeping in mind if you're struggling to get the right cropping adjustment in your photo. Now, after you've made a crop or any adjustment for that matter, and you want to go back, say you made a mistake, you can press this little undo option in the upper corner, and that's going to undo all of your options like so, and continue to step back within your project. So that's something super useful to know about no matter what type of adjustment you're doing. Now, if you want to rotate your entire photo on its side, you can press the rotate left or rotate right options to do that type of thing, as well as you can flip your image horizontally or you can flip it vertically with those two options, the flip H and flip V, as in flip horizontal, flip vertically. Now, if you want to turn a portrait photo into a landscape orientation or vice versa, you can press this little option right in the corner here, and that's going to change your crop overlay to the opposite orientation that it was initially. In this case, I'm not really into it, so I'll just reset my crop by double tapping on my screen. However, what I do want to do in this case is center up my subject a little bit more. So I'll just click on the corner and drag in till she's centered, and then I'll drag down on my crop overlay to include everything that I want in the photo. Perfect. So now my crop adjustments are complete, and I'll press the check mark to commit to that. So now we have our cropped photo. The next adjustment that we'll talk about is the light adjustment, which can be accessed by pressing the light option. Here you can adjust the brightness, contrast, and control the shadows and highlights within your photo. So if you have something that looks a little too bright or a little too dark, all of that can be fixed right here. Since we've applied some auto settings already, you can see that some of this is already adjusted, but you can go and refine this as needed. Now in this particular photo, I feel like I could maybe lift the shadows a little bit more just to soften things out, as well as bring up the whites just to add a bit of added brightness. When you're editing any slider in Lightroom Mobile, you can click and drag them, or you can double tap on the slider to adjust the value by preset increments. Depending on the tool you're using, it'll go by 5 or 10 point increments, but just by tapping on the bar like so, it's really easy to add more fine adjustments to your sliders rather than just trying to eyeball it while you drag your finger around your screen. Now within the light adjustments, there's also the curve option, and that can be accessed by pressing curve at the top of that window. Now I share everything you need to know about using the tone curve in another video that you can find in the corner right now, but the main premise of it is just to edit the exposure and contrast. To do that, I'll drag up the shadows base point like this to add a bit of a matte look. Then I'll click in the shadow range and drag down to darken, click in the midtones and drag up to brighten, and then I'll go to my highlights and drag this down just a bit to mute the brightest tones in the photo. The curve adjustment can also edit the red, green, and blue channels, so you can add a bit of color to different exposure ranges within your edit. So for example, if I press on the blue color range, if I drag up, it will add blue. If I drag down, it will add yellow. So what that means is if I add a few different anchor points here, like so, I could add a little bit of blue to the highlights by dragging up, while also adding a little bit of blue to the shadows as well. But since the midtones have another anchor point, they're going to be left completely alone and no color will be added. Now the same sort of idea applies to the other two color channels, except the difference is the colors that are actually added. Within the green channel, you'll add green by dragging up or magenta by dragging down. And if you need to delete any anchor point, you can just double tap on the anchor point to reset it back to its normal position. As for the reds, you'll add red by dragging up or cyan by dragging down. Now, obviously these look pretty intense color-wise, so I'm sure you're getting the idea that these adjustments are usually quite small and refined to add just a hint of color to the highlights, midtones, or shadows in your photo. Once again, I'll add 3 anchor points within the shadows, midtones, and highlights, and I'll add a little bit of reds to the shadows, but then I'll add a touch of cyan to the highlights, as well as the midtones. The curves adjustment is one of my favorite tools in Lightroom Mobile because you can add all of this creative contrast and color and really isolate where it affects your photo using the anchor points. To exit this tool, just click on Done, and then you'll be back in the light adjustment. Looking at our before and after now, you can see how we've really enhanced the colors and exposure of a photo already just with that one adjustment. So now let's move on to the color adjustment. Clicking on color, once again, we've already have a few settings adjusted because we did the auto setting at the beginning. However, within the color tool, you have things such as the white balance, the saturation, the HSL, which in Lightroom Mobile is called the mix option, as well as color grading. So let's go through all of those individually here. The white balance will help make white look properly white in your photo, but it can also be used creatively to make your photo feel a little more warm or cool depending on the style that you're into. For this photo, for example, I can tap on the temperature slider here to add a little more blue if I go this direction, or I can tap on the yellow side to add a little bit more warmth to the image depending on the style you're looking for. For this particular image, I want to add some blue and green tones to give it a bit of an earthy feel. So I'll drag this down in the blues just a little bit, and then I'll drag down the greens a touch as well to add a hint of green in the photo. Now for the vibrance and saturation, that's going to control how rich your colors look in the photo. And right now my photo looks a little bit too saturated, so I can reset my slider by double tapping on it and it will reset it back to 0. Now besides besides those options, you can also set your photo to black and white within the color option by pressing B and W, and that's going to turn your photo into black and white, which makes life pretty easy. If you accidentally press this and want to go back, you can just press black and white again, and it will revert back to color. The next tool is called the mix adjustment, and if you've used other photo editing tools, this adjustment is usually called HSL in a lot of other programs. What this adjustment does is lets you control the hue, saturation, and luminance of every color range within your photo, which is super useful for creating more stylized looks. So for example, you could create a more fall kind of look, you could create muted colors, you could create brown tones, whatever type of thing you're into, most of that can be achieved within this color mix option. Now you can click between the individual color ranges as you wish. So for example, let's say I wanted to edit the greens of the moss or bushes on the rock here, and then adjust the hue of that color range just by dragging around the slider. Notice how those greens change color depending where I move this adjustment. Now likewise, I can change the saturation by making it more sort of gray and desaturated, or I can make it really punchy and vibrant by dragging it the other way. Now as for the luminance, bringing this up will make those colors look brighter, while dragging it down will make those colors look darker. So this is something that's useful when you want to make certain colors pop in your photo while making other ones kind of feel less important. Darkening them down with the luminance adjustment will help you do just that. So what I like to do is go through each of these color channels and adjust the hue, saturation, and luminance accordingly, but depending on the colors in your image, certain color channels will have more effect than other ones. Now, one handy trick to know is rather than going through each one individually, you can press on this sample option here and then select the type of adjustment you want to create. So either hue, saturation, or luminance. You can press that down at the bottom of your screen there. Right now I have hue selected. So if I wanted to change the color of her jacket, for example, I can click on her jacket and then drag down to change the hue of that sampled color. So let's create a more cyan teal look. Then we can click on the saturation option, sample a similar area, and then adjust the saturation accordingly. So I'll desaturate the color in this case, and then we can go to the luminance to adjust the brightness of that sampled color. So I'll click on this similar area once again, and I'll drag down just to darken her jacket up a bit. And now we have completely changed the color of her jacket just by sampling the colors that we wanted to edit. I find that this is a little bit more simple than going through all the sliders yourself, because sometimes you don't know what color range you actually want to edit. So when you just sample things, it makes life a little bit easier. So I'm going to go through the rest of my photo sampling different areas to change the hue, saturation, and luminance. Clicking on the hue, I'll go and sample this grass, change this to a more warm color. Then I'll sample the waterfall. Try to add a little bit more blue to that. Then maybe try to sample this rock down here, see what kind of options I can get without affecting your skin tones too much. Then I'll go to the saturation option. Let's desaturate some of this yellow, desaturate some of these greens, but then increase the saturation of these blues. And then we'll add some luminance, and now that's looking pretty decent. So to exit that, you can just tap on the sample icon once again and then press done to exit out of the color mix option. So turning that on and off so far, look at that big difference that we've now made. Using the color mix option, we've changed the hue, saturation, and luminance of our colors to give it a bit more of a stylized look. Now within the color option, there's also the color grading tool, which adds even more cool color effects to your photos. So pressing on color grading, you'll have 3 different color wheels, each affecting different exposure ranges. Down in the bottom corner, you can see this one affects the highlights, this one affects the midtones, while this one affects the shadows. By pressing anywhere within your color wheel, you can add that particular hue to your image within that exposure range. So since I'm editing the shadows, I can add a certain color to the shadows. So let's go and add a bit of a green color to the shadows. Now, the closer your color sample is to the outer edge, the more saturated that color will be. But if you click and hold on that color, you can just drag out or inwards on a straight line. So it makes things really easy to change the saturation of the color that you're adding in. From there, you can also use this luminance slider to change how bright or dark that exposure range is. I'm going to darken it down just a bit. Now going to the midtones, let's go and add a secondary color to our photo. I'll add a bit of yellow this time and keep it relatively desaturated. Then I'll go to my highlights and I can add a final color to my edit to finalize everything a bit more. Now with those adjustments complete, I can press done. And now that tool has just added some nice color hues to the different exposure ranges and creates a more stylized look to our edit. Once again, looking at that before and after, we've basically given our photo a more green, earthy feel than what we started with. Now your light and color adjustments are the two major ones that you're going to be working with. However, there's also options such as the effects where you can edit the texture, clarity, dehaze, which will add a bit of soft contrast or increase the contrast. This actually works really well on a smoky or foggy day, as well as you can add a bit of a vignette by adding a white vignette if you drag up or a black vignette if you drag down. That's just going to darken the edges of your photo a bit and draw your attention closer to the middle of your image. You can sharpen your photo by using the detail option. You can increase the sharpening as you wish, as well as you can reduce some noise, which is basically that little bit of grain you see in your photo. If you've taken an image at night, often you'll have a lot of noise, which can kind of make your photo look a little bit less nice. So by increasing the noise reduction, it'll help to smooth out that grain and give your photo a bit more of a crisp look. Then for optics, you can do things such as removing chromatic aberration and lens corrections. I like to enable both for all my images. And then with that, you're basically done your edit. But now, what if you wanted to apply this look onto some other photos? Well, then there's two different ways that you can do that. The first is with presets, and the second is by copying and pasting your settings in Lightroom Mobile. So let's first talk about creating presets. Now, if you're familiar with like an Instagram filter, a preset is the same type of thing. They have a saved set of adjustments that you can apply onto your images at any time you wish. Now, you can create presets for yourself. You can find some online for free, or you can download my free pack of Lightroom Mobile presets down in the description below just by signing up to my email list. Wink. Now, for this example, I'm going to just create a preset based on the edits that I just made. So I'll click on the presets option, and here you'll find all of the presets that you've either imported, created, or you'll find some of the default options that come with Lightroom Mobile. Since I want to create a brand new preset, I'm going to click on the three dots icon and go to create preset. I'll then call this to waterfall preset, and then I'll make sure that the following options that you see here are checked off. From there, you can choose to create a new group for your preset to keep everything organized, or you can just add it to your user presets, which is what I'm going to do in this case. So clicking user presets, pressing the check mark, now we have a new preset added that is within our user presets. If we go down to our waterfall preset down at the bottom here. Since this image is edited, let's go and add it to one of the other versions of this photo just to see how this preset looks. Now with my other image selected, I can apply the same look as before without doing all of the work because I have that preset. So I'll press on presets, go and find the preset I just created, tap on that to add it. And now with one click, we have edited this photo with the exact same adjustments as before. Now presets only work best when you create and apply them to similar images. So for example, in this case, both the photos were taken at the exact same place at the same time. So obviously they're gonna look pretty much the same. To take this one step further, imagine you create a preset for your sunset photos. That preset could be used for your other sunset photos. However, that same preset probably won't work very well for your indoor photos, or say you just took a photo in the snow or something. It's just not going to look very good because it's a completely different situation. So that's why you end up having to create a bunch of different presets depending on the look and the environment that your photo is being taken in. Now, besides creating presets, the other option that you have is to copy and paste your settings between your different images. So I'm going to reset this photo by pressing on the reset option and reset it to open. Now we're back to its original starting point, and I'll go back to the library. To copy and paste your settings, you'll first need to select the photo that's edited, then click on the three dots icon and go to copy settings. Make sure everything is selected that you want to copy, and then press the check mark to copy them. Then within your album, you can press the three dots, choose select, and then tap on the images that you want to paste your settings onto. Then in the bottom bar, you can just press paste, click apply, and now those same adjustments will be applied to your other images. This is a great alternative to presets if you don't want your settings to be saved for long-term future use. This is a better option if you just want a quick batch editing solution. Now, once your images are edited, you need to export them, obviously. To export a photo in Lightroom Mobile, you can either export them individually or all at once. They both follow pretty much the exact same steps, so let's just pretend like we're going to export all three of the images that we just edited. So press on the three dots icon, press select, and then press the images that I want to export. From there, I'll press on share, and then I'll press on export as. Here, you'll want to make sure your file type is set to JPEG if you plan on sharing your image. However, you can choose between TIFF and DNG if you want to have a bit more file information to work on your computer or something like that. Then make sure your dimensions are set to largest available. quality at 100%. And then in the more options, you can adjust a few other settings for your export. Most of the time, I just leave this as is. Then once you're done, you can press the check mark to begin exporting your photo. Or in this case, we actually have 3, so our photos. Now it will ask you where you want to save your images. Now I've just blacked out all of my contacts so you don't have to see my ridiculous contact photos I have for all my friends. But the other options that you'll have are things like texting someone, you can email them, or you can share it via a bunch of other apps on your device. What I usually like to do is just save it directly to my phone. So I'll just press save 3 images like so, and that's going to save those photos directly to my camera roll with their editing adjustments. And so with that workflow, you can just rinse and repeat that across all of the photos you work with in Lightroom Mobile. There is a ton of tools available in Lightroom Mobile, but with some of the easy tricks that you learned here, now you can take advantage of everything to its fullest potential and make your photos look a little bit more professional. Now, if you want to help kickstart your editing in Lightroom Mobile, then make sure to download my free Lightroom preset pack down in the description below. You can sign up to my email list and I'll send you an email with a handful of great Lightroom Mobile presets to get yourself started with. This preset pack includes some basic general adjustments for creating unique exposure effects, as well as some of the other looks that I've shared in previous tutorials on this channel. So if you want to check that out, once again, it's down below. Anyways, if you enjoyed today's video, then make sure to hit that like button, as it really does support this channel and feeds the algorithm gods. I appreciate it. Thank you for doing that. Anyways, my name is Brennan from BeWellCreative.com, and I'll catch you back here next time for another new tutorial. See ya then.